Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afuraitkaitnit, Meye Ojira Medinde Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan. Akwamuman, Amaruka, Atifi, Odwirafo. That means greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning African, Black people. Today is ODWIRA Day, Purification Day. My name is Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan. Odwirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in to the show. We are opening up the chat room right now for individuals who are on the phone line. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, just hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you have a question or a comment in the chat room, you must log in as a user in the chat room so that you can interact. If you do not have a login or username, you can set up one quickly in Blog Talk so that you can interact in the chat room. And we're going to put a couple of links in the chat room right now for the NHOMA page, as well as the Akon Economic Development Model page. For the individuals who are new to our broadcast, we have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. On Joda, Monday nights, we have Akhan for Nanasom, Ancient, Authentic, Akhan, Ancestral Religion, where we deal with the Akhan expression of Nanasom, the Akhan expression of Ancestral Religion. First of all, of course, because we are Akhan. Number 2, because of the misinformation that has been propagated about Akhan culture, Akhan philosophy, Akhan cosmology, Akhan ancestral religious practices, propagated not only in the Western Hemisphere, but also propagated by individuals in Africa, in Ghana, Ivory Coast, and so forth, who have been infected with Christianity, infected with Islam, infected with white culture in general, these fake religions and perverse culture of the whites and their offspring, and therefore their presentation of Akhan culture and cosmology and ritual practice and so forth has become infected as well, although couched in the aesthetic of the culture, the traditional culture. So we bring forward accurate information regarding various aspects and all aspects of Akhan ancestral religion, rooted, of course, in our direct blood circle. Of course, our ancestral religious practices are inherited by us directly from our ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circles. Those are our unknown, insamampo, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors who were unknown, mpanyinfo, spiritually cultivated elders and eldresses when they lived amongst us in the world. So we get into detail about that on Joda on Monday night. For example, we dealt with the notion of the divinity of Ntafo, of twins, last night. We went into some detail about that from the Akhan cultural expression, dealing with the Abosom Abam, as well as Mame, were actually Ma'al and Ma'at in ancient Kanat and Kemet. So we went into detail about that last night. You can download that archive. On Wednesday nights, Awukuda, Wakuada Wednesdays, we have Egua Marketplace. Egua Marketplace, we have individuals, groups who have their own businesses, organizations, and institutions. Afuraitkaini people who have established businesses, organizations, and institutions in the community, who are serving the community in a positive capacity and also conveying and transmitting their ancestral religious values in the process. So we have individuals come on to the show. They sit with us for the entire show to talk about their business, organization, institution, how they founded and began their practice, how they impact the community in a positive capacity, how their ancestral religious values inform their service to the community. So when you go to the Akon Economic Development page, you'll actually see the list of businesses, organizations, and institutions that we have had on the show. You'll also see the links to their website, but you'll also see with the Akon page, the Akon page itself is the publication of our model called Akon Economic Development Model. We published that model dealing with an economic development model approach rooted in ancestral religious values. So we published that model. You can download that from the Akon Economic Development Model page. We did a 4-part series on Blog Talk where we dissected the model. That 4-part series you can download directly from the page as well. We also have a couple of other broadcasts on that page, the Egwakuti, the economic warfare broadcast, and also No Kwarifo, Ne Amamre, self-employment, and ancestral culture. So those 6 broadcasts you can download directly from that page, the Akon Economic Development page. You can also download the Akon Economic Development Model. But you'll also see the list of businesses, organizations, and institutions, and their websites. And you'll also see the links to their broadcasts where they sat with us for interviews for the entire 2-hour period of the show. Now, in the Akon Economic Development Model, we not only talk about our collective identity as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, and once we align with that spiritually, then we actually ascend to naturally and grow into that natural inclination, that natural propensity to work in harmony with one another. That does not have to be taught. Once we align ourselves with order, align ourselves with our Kra, our Krawa, our soul, our divine consciousness, the divinity that dwells within us, once we align with order, then we're naturally inclined and we embrace that natural inclination to work interdependently, economically and socially and politically and so forth. So once you deal with that collective identity spiritually, then all you need at that point is strategy on how to best marshal your resources to achieve the desired outcome. In the Akon Economic Development Model, we utilize the strategy of starve the beast and feed the pride. So we make an assessment on a weekly basis as well as a daily basis on the funds that we would have potentially spent with the whites and their offspring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We take those funds away from those white businesses. Instead of giving them our money, we reallocate them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks. So as a community, we have been supporting these businesses, organizations, and institutions on a weekly basis. So when you look on the Akon Economic Development page, as we said, you'll see the list of businesses we've been supporting over the past 5 months on a weekly basis. And this list of businesses is ever growing. So starve the beast and feed the pride. You take those funds that you would have wasted at white businesses, CVS or Walmart or Target or Starbucks or McDonald's or wherever you would have wasted that money. You take that $5 or $10 or $20, starve that white beast, and feed the pride. Direct that $20 to the business, organization, or institution of the week. This is simply a conscious decision that we make on a weekly basis and begins as well as a daily basis. If 1,000 of our people who are connected via Facebook engage this process, then we would take $20, of course, times 1,000, $20,000 away from white businesses, white individuals who are using that money to support their white children, whether they're white Hispanics or white Arabs or white Europeans or white Asians and so forth. We take that $20,000 away from the whites and their offspring, our enemies, and reallocate it to the business of the week. That means that business would receive an infusion of $20,000 of capital that they can use to expand their businesses, therefore expanding their service to our people, employ more of our people, serve our people at a greater capacity. So it's simply a win-win situation for us. If we do not engage this process of starving the beast and feeding the pride, then every single time we reach in our pockets and give our money to our enemies, we are simply financing our own oppression by default. We are either going to spend money with our own people, support our own people, allow our own people to expand their businesses and hire our people so that they can have employment, but also so that they can serve us at a greater capacity, or by default, we're going to allow the whites and their offspring to rob us of our resources on a daily basis so they can expand their businesses, so they can support their children, support themselves, enrich themselves, and oppress our people at the same time. We're either going to continue to have high unemployment rates, or we're going to reallocate the funds that we spend with our enemies, our community. If we took just a percentage of the over $1 trillion that we receive in income that we spend on a daily basis throughout the course of the year, if we took a percentage of that and redirected it away from the whites directly to our businesses, we have the capacity to employ every single unemployed Afurakani and Afuraitkaitnit male and individual in the country with high-paying jobs in black business. We do not have to have one person unemployed. We can take the funds that we are wasting with our enemies and employ all of our people. But what we're doing right now is employing our enemies. We need to make sure that they are unemployed and shift those resources to our people so that all of our people are employed and their people are unemployed. And we have that capacity. We simply need to make that decision. So this is what we do with the Akhan Economic Development Model, part of AWAREGU Marketplace Day on Awukuda Wednesdays on our Blog Talk Radio program channel. So tonight is Ben Nada, or Aben Nada, which means Tuesday in the Akhan language. Our show is ODWIRA, which means purification. In the Akhan language, ODWIRA means purification. It also means the celebration of purification. However, the term is derived from our ancestral language of ancient Kanat, Nubia, and Kemet. There you will find in the Medusa, in the hieroglyphs, in the language, the term Jira means purification. It also means the celebration of purification. So the reason why we continue to use that terminology in the Akhan language is because it's directly derived of our ancestral language. This is also why we utilize that terminology when we designate ourselves as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African black people in the Western Hemisphere. We designate ourselves as Odwira Man. Oman means nation. Nation in the sense of a place, but nation also in the sense of the nation, the people. It means nation or people. In the Akhan language, it also means nation or people, place in the language of ancient Kemet. It also means the land of the setting sun, the west, in the language of Kemet. So Jira, mine, in the language of ancient Kanat, Kemet, which goes back over 42,000 years and is the parent language of the various languages on the continent of Afuraitkai today. The term Jira, mine, means purified or pure. Jira, mine, nation, but not any nation, the nation mine in the west, mine, or Manhood, the land of the setting sun. So Odwira mine is the purified nation, the pure Jira nation, mine. That means the people who ended up in the Western Hemisphere, or mine, or Manhood. This is Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people who, quote unquote, died but resurrected, just like Asar, who dies and resurrects. It becomes Kaniti Amintiu, the first of the Westerners, the one who purified himself and was resurrected. We are engaged in purification, returning to our ancestral culture, returning to our ancestral religious practices. And when we engage that process, when our ancestresses and ancestors were forced into this region, those who maintain their ancestral religious practices, maintain that cultural purity and ritual purity, those are the ones who waged war against the whites and their offspring and defeated enslavement in South America, in the Caribbean, Central America, and in North America. And we've done broadcasts, for example, Nana Song, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, and the defeat of slavery. So we talk about how through the practice of hoodoo and juju and voodoo and so forth in North America, we waged war against the whites and offspring and forced the end of enslavement. We have the responsibility and the capacity, but of course the responsibility to complete that process so we can establish our own independent nation, self-governing and self-ruling. As Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, ODWIRA, the purified nation in the West. So this is the terminology that we use for all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people who are descendants of those who were forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Kwesi, the great perversity of the enslavement era. We have become our own collective. We are a group of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people who have forged a collective identity based on our experience as well as based on our spirit genetic blending in the Western Hemisphere. We are, of course, have a relationship interdependent with our people on the continent as well. But we also have a collective identity here. We are ODWIRA, the purified nation in the West. Our practice is of ancestral religion. Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion. African ancestral religion. Wherever black people are in the world, over thousands of years, we all engage in the same fundamental practice. We align ourselves with the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and the Great Father, through the agency of the Abosom, the forces in nature, the Orisha, the Vodou, and so forth, and the Nananom Nsamako, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. The term we use, Nanasom, again, those two terms, Nana and Som, derive from the language of ancient Kanat and Kemet. It can be found, these terms also can be found defined with the same definitions in the Akhan language as well. But Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African ancestral religion, fundamentally is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. So that means the ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order not to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject so that we can restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, thereby restoring balance to our lives. These are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion, the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That, of course, allows us to realign ourselves with divine order. That is what ancestral religion is, the alignment with divine order and the realignment with divine order. That's simply what it is. And there are various expressions of that. You have Akanfo Nanasom, Akhan ancestral religion, Yoruba Nanasom, Yoruba ancestral religion, Ebe and Fon Nanasom, Ebe and Fon ancestral religion, Bakongo Nanasom, Bakongo ancestral religion, Maasai Nanasom, Maasai ancestral religion, all across the continent, wherever we are, including in the Western Hemisphere. The Akhan people, for example, migrated to the Western Hemisphere and were forced to migrate. We continued our practice under the form of hoodoo. So hoodoo, Nanasom, is the Akhan expression of ancestral religion in the Western Hemisphere in North America. Juju, amongst the Yoruba people in North America, is the ancestral religion of the Yoruba people in North America as it was preserved throughout the hundreds of years of enslavement. Juju is a Yoruba term. The same with Vodou amongst the Fon and Ebe people in North America. Before these terms became generic terms for African religion and so forth, hundreds of years later, when they were first brought here, the Akhan brought hoodoo, the Yoruba brought juju, the Fon and Ebe people brought Vodou and so forth, and the same is true with the various other groups. So we have our own expression of Nanasom or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion here in the Western Hemisphere as well, that are just as equally valid as those expressions on the continent. And they are rooted in our ancestral blood circles. We have carried our ancestral religious traditions through our blood circles and have maintained them through our blood circles. So we are dependent on no one outside of our blood circles, whether they're on the continent or in the Caribbean or wherever, anyone outside of our blood circles. We are not dependent on anyone to maintain our ancestral religious tradition. We are dependent only on the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, the forces in nature who are born with us, assigned to us pre-incarnation, and the Nananome Nsamanko, our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors who were assigned to us pre-incarnation before we even got into the womb. They have been with us since we have been here. And this is why we were able to maintain our ancestral religious tradition. So during the ODWIRA show, what we do is purify concepts, cosmology, philosophy, and so forth. There's a great deal of misinformation dealing with our ancient ancestral religious practices as well as those contemporary expressions. So we deal with that in various forms. What we're going to deal with tonight, questions that often come up when we're dealing with Nanasom, ancestral religion, and people returning to their ancestral culture, ancestral religion based on their blood circles, returning to purification. Questions often arise regarding relationships, of course, often arise regarding the relationship of marriage, divorce, ancestral religion, and these various things. So we're going to get into that tonight. And again, for the individuals who are on the phone line, if you have a question or a comment, hit the number 1. If you are in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go to our publication, OBARIMA, Afurakani, Manhood. If you look at the link we placed in the chat room, the NHOMA link in the chat room, you'll see that that is one of the books, one of the books that we have published. We have published 16 books to date. We have more books coming out this year. One of them is OBARIMA, Afurakani, Manhood. We have ebook versions of our 16 books that are free downloads. The soft cover versions we do print in-house, in color, on our own printers, and we sell those as well, and they range between $8 and $11. You can order those publications directly from the website. You can go right now to the OBARIMA book on the NHOMA page, the publications page. We're going to deal with that publication. And what we did with OBARIMA, just as a side note, we published this book back in 2008, so-called 2008. We have workshops based on the book that we provide, free workshops for Afurakani young men and adults. We actually have an initiative regarding that, and you'll see that on the page. We've always done the workshops for free. We give away a free copy of one of the softcover books to everyone who attends the workshop. We also have a video series where we go through the entire book, similar to the way we do in a workshop for those individuals who are not able to attend the workshop. As long as they have a computer or even a smartphone, they can download the entire book in the ebook version, and they can also download the video series where we go through the entire book. That way, no matter where we are in the world, Afurakani young men and adults can be reached right where they are right now. So we have a funding initiative, a GoFundMe initiative regarding that, because we also provide the option of becoming entrepreneurial with regard to the OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood book and our other publications. For those young men and as well as adults who need to generate income, become entrepreneurs, they can become distributors of our softcover books immediately. Doesn't matter what the past work history is, so all of that information is on the page. We published the book in 2008, and we will be coming out with the complement to this book. This is OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood. We'll be dealing with Afuraitkaitnit womanhood, and we plan to have that released this year by the end of the summer. So the book is broken up into 7 sections, dealing with the 7 principal values of Afurakani manhood. Those 7 principal values are connected to the abosom, the forces in nature, the spirits that animate nature, the specific abosom that animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which govern the 7-day week cycle. course, the 7-day week cycle was introduced and recognized and established by our ancestresses and ancestors thousands of years ago. The whites and their offspring learned about that 7-day cycle from our people. That 7-day cycle is based on the movement of the sun, moon, and planets in relationship to Earth. That 7-day cycle governs all natural cycles on Earth. It also governs the chronobiological cycle called the circa-septon cycle, which is a 7-day cycle within which different physiological processes manifest in the physical body every 7 days. So the spirit forces in nature that animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week cycle, they also give their input into these 7 principal values of manhood. Therefore, this set of 7 values is connected to a sacred cycle, a set of energy complexes that govern all aspects of Earth, the natural cycles of Earth, and also govern our biology. That also includes our hormonal secretions, also includes our behavior, our character, our temperament, our emotional output, and so forth, our thoughts, and the way we process our thoughts. And that, of course, influences our behavior. So this is a holistic set of 7 principal values connected to the abosom, the forces in nature that govern all natural cycles on Earth. So in the same fashion, the Afuraitkaitnit womanhood book will be based on those same 7 principal values with certain nuances that are slightly varied based, of course, on the expression of the feminine. But the same principal values are fundamentally the same principal values. There are just slight differences in expression based on the male energy and the female energy. So we're going to go through section 6 of this publication because it includes information dealing with marriage. AWAREGYE is the term for marriage in Akhan. The name of the broadcast tonight is AWAREGU and AWAREGYE, talking about divorce and marriage. We want to deal with both. Of course, when we look at our family situations and so forth in this country over decades, we find that we have not been successful really at all. 50+% of all marriages end in divorce, and even those who remain married, many individuals are cheating on one another or not happy in the marriage and so forth. So things have not been successful. So we want to get back to an ancestral approach, rooted in divine order, dealing with these issues. And that includes, sometimes people have misinformation. They study a little bit of information regarding quote-unquote African culture or Pan-Africanism and so forth, and they'll start repeating slogans based on people who are misinformed. And they'll say things like, divorce is not African. That's not what we engage in. That's not part of our culture. All this other nonsense. So we need to deal with reality. There are ritual processes that establish the marriage ritual. There are ritual processes connected to forces in nature for AWAREGU, which is divorce, as well as AWAREGYE, which is marriage. And that's been true all along. And we'll talk about some information from ancient Kemet to deal with that, as well as the current state, our expressions today. So first we're going to get into this section number 6. We're going to go through that information, and we're going to show its relevance to the topic. So when we deal with these seven principal values, the 6th principal value, of course, is connected to the 6th day of the week. The 6th day of the week is governed by the planet Afi. The planet Afi in Akhan culture, it's called Venus, of course, by the whites and their offspring, but this is the abosom, the female abosom, Afi, is the same divinity, Het Heru in ancient Kemet. She's also called Chetche in Akhan. She's also called Fait in ancient Kemet. So the name Afi and Chetche in Akhan for this divinity is Fait and Het Her in ancient Kemet for the same divinity, because the same force in nature. We still invoke her by the same name in the Akhan tradition. She's called Oshun in the Yoruba tradition. The male divinity, a major male divinity operating through this planetary body, he is called Fi, in Akhan. That's one of his titles as he's operating through this celestial body. He's also called Amin Men. In ancient Kemet, he's called Men or Amin Men, but he's also called Fi. That's one of his titles, the divinity of the lifted arm or the raised arm. So when you see his raised arm, he's called Fai, but he's also another variation of that name is Fi. This is why he's called Fi in Akhan. But he's also called Min and Amin Min in ancient Kemet. He's called Amin Min in Akhan as well. So both titles for both divinities, Fai and Tet in ancient Kemet. For the female divinity, she's called Afi and Chet in Akhan. Min or Amin Min in ancient Kemet, as well as Fai or Fi for that male divinity. In Akhan, he's also called Amin Min. He's also called Fi, reduplicated in the Akhan language. So we're dealing with these two forces in nature that deal with reproduction, deal with procreative activity. We're going to get into that. But this planet and the energy that animates this planetary body is the sixth day of the week, Ptah, or Friday, called Ptah, the Da, or day of Afi and Fi. And that planet's energy governs the day. So just like you understand, solar energy will heat you up. That affects your emotions, affects your capacity to engage in, externalized aggressive activity and so forth when you're heated up. In the same fashion, you recognize that the moon has an effect on the planet as well. The gravitational pull of the moon affects the rising and falling of the tide. The gravitational pull of the moon also affects the rising and falling of the tides or water levels, quote unquote, within your body. Over 70+% of the earth is governed by water. Over 70% of your body is water. So when the gravitational pull of the moon affects the rising of the tides on earth, that also includes the rising of the tides within your body, simply meaning that when you're breathing and taking in, as well as taking in water, but breathing and taking in moisture and so forth, you're retaining more moisture than otherwise. So therefore the tides, quote unquote, rise within your body. You become cooled down, become more introspective, more contemplative and so forth, more internalized, introverted, full of water. When you become heated up, fired up, burnt out, so to speak, but also fired up, heated up, aroused, and so forth, you have that fiery energy that changes the manner in which you focus, that changes your behavior, changes your expression. We can recognize that readily with regard to fire and water, dealing with the sun and the moon. Awusi Da and Joe Da talking about Sunday and Monday. But the other planetary bodies have similar effects on the planet Earth with their gravitational pull and the kind of energy they emanate. And they also, of course, have effects on our physical body as we are entities living upon this great Earth Mother. So we have cataloged as Afuraitkaitnit people these influences, as well as the forces in nature that animate these celestial bodies and affect us as well, and govern our spirits as well, and govern our Akra, our soul, Akrawa, our soul's divine consciousness as well. Of course, we're dealing with the sixth day of the week, this planet Afi, Fi, how it affects the physical body of Earth, affects our physical bodies, and therefore affects our temperament, our expression of our emotions, our mentality, and so forth. So that's the backdrop. And the same is true for all 7 days of the week. And the 7 principal values carry the energy of the day of the week. The abosom that governs that celestial body for that day of the week and how it impacts us. Therefore, every single day of the week, because we have this manual of manhood, and the same will be true for the female, the manual of womanhood, every single day of the week, you have a specific principal value that you focus on. You have an opportunity to refine your character, refine your focus, refine your energetic output, rooted in that energetic complex every single day of the week. You have a means by which you can regulate and align yourself spiritually with order every single day of the week throughout the course of your life to maintain your focus as an Afurakani man and Afuraitkaitnit woman. So we have this book. This is a manual for manhood. And then the female book will be the manual for womanhood, dealing with these principal values. And this is why we say that the principal values of OBARIMA, Afurakani manhood, as well as Afuraitkaitnit womanhood, stream from the divine and ancestral forces of manhood and womanhood that define your spirit and shape your potential. So these are not just proverbs, they're coming from a manifestation of the energy that regulates the actual day of the week that you came into the world, but also every single day of the week. All right, so let's go to page, we're going to get to page 37 in OBARIMA Afurakani man. Now, this is, we say the sixth principal value of OBARIMA directs us to, and the sixth principal value is marriage. So if you, even before we read that, when the seven principal values very quickly, the first principal value is order. Principal value of manhood, recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. Recognizing that Amen and Amenet, Nyamewa, Nyame and Nyamewa, the great father and great mother, they function together as one divine unit, the supreme being that is the divine balance of male and female, the foundational relationship that governs all aspects of creation. There's a great God and a great goddess. They are both the forces in nature. They are goddesses and gods that balance one another out. We have ancestresses and ancestors. And our relationship as Afurakani men and Afuraitkaitnit women is rooted in that foundational relationship of divine balance. There's no great God without a great goddess. There's no great goddess without a great God. That's not. So when we deal with them directly, it's not abstract. We align ourselves ritually and we communicate directly with Amen and directly with Amenet, Nyame and Nyamewa as they're called in Akhan. And they communicate directly with us. And we communicate directly with the Abosom, the forces of nature, the goddesses and the gods. They possess us and communicate with us through divination, through ritual communication, Akon, spirit possession, and so forth. We communicate directly with the Nananom Nsamafo, the ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated. They possess our people, communicate directly with our people, show themselves clairvoyantly and everything else. We deal directly with them. So we have a direct understanding and relationship and experience with the balance of male and female, from the supreme being to the divinity, to the ancestresses and ancestors, to us in our community. So the foundational principle, the first principle of manhood, order. Recognize divine balance of creation, divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. The second principle value is balance. To establish that balance in every aspect of your existence. So first you must recognize that order that governs all of creation. Once you recognize that and align with it, meaning aligning with Nyamewa and Nyame, Amenet, and Amen, then you must establish that balance in every aspect of your life. Whether it's through not just relationships, but the balance of expansion and contraction, dealing with work and rest, and nation building and family development, and balancing your emotional output, the fire and the water within you and so forth. You must establish that balance in every aspect of your existence. The third principle is arm. To arm yourself to defend the order and balance with your life. Once you've established, recognized the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female, you've established it in every aspect of your existence, not only internally within yourself, within your physical body, balancing yourself within your spirit body, balancing yourself within your emotional output, balancing that within your thoughts, intentions, and actions, balancing that. You connect with other individuals, establish that balance within your family life, connect with other individuals and families who are engaged in that kind of balancing spiritually. Then you begin to build community, establish nation building processes, and connect with other individuals who are on the same page. Once you begin to establish such communities, you must recognize the reality that the whites and their offspring are spirits of disorder. They are parasites, and they will seek to destroy what you build. So you must arm yourself to defend that balance, order, and balance with your life. The next principal value is respect. And of course, we establish this reality that we must continuously respect or review, because spectate is to view. So when we talk about respect, we brought this information out over a decade ago. When we talk about respect, the proper definition is to review. When you respect, you review every thought, intention, and action, and harmonize each with divine order. And we have a 7-stage decision-making process called Inyansapo to arrive at such that level of respect or reviewing so that we can align every thought, intention, and action with divine order. The next principal value is insight. Exercise proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life. And then you achieve individual manhood. So you recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. You have established that balance in every aspect of your existence. You have armed yourself to defend that order and balance with your life as an Afurakani man. You respect and review every thought, every intention, every action, and harmonize each with divine order so that you don't just establish that balance in your life, but you must perpetuate that throughout the course of your life for the rest of your life. So you must continuously respect or review every thought, intention, and action and harmonize each with divine order. And then you must exercise proper insight, making proper judgment, not only to meet certain exigencies, overcome negative obstacles and so forth, what are perceived to be obstacles and so forth, but also to make proper decisions, overcome negative situations that have lingered from the past that were not addressed in the past. You need to use proper insight based on your capacity to respect and review every thought, intention, and action and align with divine order. When you can do that, then you can exercise proper insight to solve issues, to bring resolution to problems, to govern yourself, but also participate in the governance of the nation. Sound systems of governance is rooted in that insight, and that insight is rooted in being able to continuously respect or review every thought, intention, and action and align each with divine order. And that is rooted in our capacity to defend through arms the order and balance that we have established in every aspect of our lives. So every principle builds upon one another. Once you can exercise proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life, then you have achieved individual manhood. That's principle number 5. You've ascended to your position and crystallized into an Afurakani man. Now, we get to principle number 6. Because you've achieved individual manhood, now we get to principle number 6, which we're dealing with tonight. Principle number 6, the 6th principle value of OBARIMA directs us to marriage. Participate fully in the divine order of creation through uniting with the Afuraitkaitnit female who is your balance. And of course, when we release the OBARIMA, the Afuraitkaitnit womanhood book, the same principle value will be in section number 6, except it will read, participate fully in the divine order of creation through aligning with the Afurakani male who is your balance. So it'll be the same thing. So we're talking about participating fully. So in this chapter we say once an Afurakani male has become OBARIMA man, he is then qualified and has the responsibility to participate fully in the divine order of creation through uniting with the Afuraitkaitnit female who is his balance. As an emanation of Inyame, God, or Amen, the Afurakani OBARIMA man can only be balanced out when he connects with the emanation of Inyamewa, or Amenet, God, the Afuraitkaitnit Oba, or woman. When an Afurakani OBARIMA man is fully developed, actualized as OBARIMA, actualized as a man, he has become a fully developed half. When the Afuraitkaitnit Oba, or woman, is fully developed, actualized as an Oba, which is the Akhan term for woman, she has become a fully developed half. The two halves must at some point come together in order to comprise the whole, just as Inyame and Inyamewa, the great father and great mother, Amen and Amenet, are united as the supreme being, the two great halves of the divine whole. The Afurakani OBARIMA unites with the Afuraitkaitnit Oba in order to properly execute his Nkrabea, his divine function or mission. The function he is given by Inyamewa, Inyame, the great mother and great father, to execute in the world. Of course, every Afurakani man and Afuraitkaitnit woman, as well as plant life, animal life, and mineral life, We all have a specific function to execute in creation. Just like every cell in your body is designed and formed to execute a specific function within the body, within the organ or organ systems of which it is a component part. So in the same fashion, Afurakani people, and only Afuraitkaitnit people, we are cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. And we are cells within organs within the great divine body. The organs of which we are cells are the deity. They are the forces in the body that regulate order in the body. The great divine body is Amen and Amenet, Nyamewa. The organs within their great divine body are the goddesses and gods, the Abosom, the Orishas, Vodu. And we are cells, children of those organs. But as children of those organs and cells, we have a specific function to execute within that organ. And when we execute that function, we're serving the organ, our parent deity, but we're serving the Supreme Being at the same time. Your heart cell serves the heart function. It's also serving you, the great being, at the same time. Liver cells serve the liver functions and serving you, the great body, at the same time. So we have a specific function to execute within the body. That is, in our Akhan culture, called the Nkra and Nkrabia, the divine function or mission, so-called destiny or life focus. But the term destiny is more properly defined as function. What is your function to execute in creation? So when the Afurakani man unites with the Afuraitkaitnit woman in order to execute his Nkra and Nkrabia, his divine function or mission, the union of OBARIMA and OBA, man and woman, is the crystallization of the first principal value of OBARIMA and OBA, recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. So we go back to that first principal value of manhood as well as womanhood, which is order. Recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. We crystallize that first principle when we first achieve individual manhood. We become OBARIMA. We achieve individual womanhood. We become OBA, and then we unite. The fully formed Afurakani man, the fully formed Afuraitkaitnit woman, two halves finally unite and become that one whole. Now we crystallize that first principle. And of course, it is, as we say, a reenactment and replenishment of the first act of creation. The union of Nyamewa, Nyame, Amenet, Amen, our greatest ancestress and ancestor. And when we say the greatest ancestress and ancestor, we're not talking about this foolish notion, this idiotic notion that God, quote unquote, really just means the great ancestor, the first person to found the clan, and then later on, thousands of years later, people started to deify the first man and woman who founded the clan, and that becomes the concept of our God. That is pure stupidity. Only Negroes who follow the whites and their offspring repeat that nonsense because they're engaged in pseudo practices, pseudo ritual practices, but also engaged in pseudo philosophy. We invoke Amen and Amenet, the great father and mother who formed the universe. We communicate with them directly in our ancestral religious practice, so we know exactly who they are. So of course, because we're descendant of them, just like your cell is a descendant, of course, of your great body, Amen and Amenet are our great ancestor and ancestress in that sense. The union of OBARIMA and OBA brings a balance to the spirit that can only be experienced. It allows both individuals to connect with Nyamewa, Nyame in a balanced and whole fashion and on a regular basis. We must recognize that when we have children, we are bringing Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestresses and ancestors back into the world. These eldresses and elders, ancient spirits operating through the bodies of newborns, are totally dependent upon us and our direction. They are dependent upon us to cultivate them in a balanced fashion. We cannot recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female, without having at some point fully participated in this condition, physically and spiritually. So that is the cosmological foundation for AWAREGYE, for marriage, the union of Amen and Amenet. We are cells within the great divine body of Amen and Amenet. So we are naturally wired and inclined as Afurakani men and Afuraitkaitnit women to crystallize that original union, to participate and reenact that original act of creation. And of course, in order to bring ancestresses and ancestors into the world, back into the world, we must crystallize that union once again. So now we say AWAREGYE marriage. The term for marriage in Akhan culture is a vehicle of spiritual renewal for the Afurakani OBARIMA man and Afuraitkaitnit Oba woman, and also a vehicle of purification for the return of our Nananom Nsamanfo. Why is it a vehicle of purification? Because when we engage ourselves fully as Afurakani men, Afuraitkaitnit women, we purify ourselves on a regular basis ritually, then we can bring those ancestresses and ancestors back. When they are children, of course, when they are newborns, they have lost their quote-unquote memory on the surface of who they are, even though it's embedded within their spirit and it manifests as they grow and develop. As we said, they are totally dependent upon us. It is our responsibility to raise them up according to the divine function that they were seated to execute, that is encoded within their own krawa, their soul, their divine consciousness, the spirit force that dwells within their head region. It is our responsibility to cultivate them towards that function. It becomes this marriage, this union, this AWAREGYE is therefore a vehicle of purification. Because if we constantly and continuously, as we say, respect and review every thought, intention, and action and align them with divine order, we not only do that for ourselves, but also for the children, which are actually ancestresses and ancestors who come through us and who are being reared by us. We say it must be noted that both OBARIMA and Oba must be committed to fully operationalizing the institution of AWAREGYE, marriage, for the spiritual function of AWAREGYE marriage to be realized. When one or both parties cease to or refuse to utilize the sacredness of AWAREGYE for its intended purpose, the union is no longer functional. Afuraitkaitnit created and institutionalized AWAREGYE, or AWAREGYE, the marriage ceremony, and so forth. Yet, Afuraitkaitnit also created and institutionalized AWAREGU, which means the annihilation or annulment gu of the AWAREGYE marriage, meaning divorce. Exercising proper NHOMA insight allows the Afurakani OBARIMA man to make the right choice when considering AWAREGYE, considering marriage. However, if it is found over time that the wrong choice was made, the NHOMA of the Afurakani OBARIMA will direct him to the dissolution of the union in harmony with divine order. So let's talk about that for a second. We talk about the marriage union. We talk about ritual coming together. You read, for example, in ancient Kemet, sometimes you see these sites talking about, well, marriage is just a civil affair. It has to do with contracts. There was no religious aspect to marriage. That's pure foolish. It's dealing with the white snare offspring, not understanding the culture. When we come together, we have a specific function to execute in creation. That means that before we came into the womb, we were assigned to specific abosom, forces in nature, that are born into the world with us. And we have a divine function. And of course, when we connect with someone of the opposite sex, of course, we must align and see if our divine function aligns with theirs. If it does, then we can engage that process. That is a spiritual recognition. We engage in divinatory practice and on different levels to determine ancestral communication as well as communication with family members and so forth to determine if this is the right individual to align with, if our divine function, our mission, our nkrabia is compatible. If so, and that of course is encoded within us before we are even born, so if they are compatible, then we can move forward in that process, in that AWAREGYE process. Sometimes individuals, even if they are on the same page culturally, they may not be compatible. Just because you're in the same culture doesn't mean that every single person you come in contact with is compatible. Some people's energy complexes are not compatible, so they're not naturally drawn to one another. Some are. And when we deal with conflict, we talked about dissolution. Now, if you have personality conflict, with maturity, personality conflict can be overcome. That's not a basis for a dissolution of a marriage. Some people, they have personality conflicts for a while and they end up dissolving the marriage, and later on they may regret it or something like that, or they get involved with other individuals. Personality conflicts is not the foundation for a dissolution. If you have the same core values, the same principal values, but then overlaid upon that are these personality conflicts based on immaturity, based on spiritual disalignment and so forth, then we have within the culture ritual practice, which is NHOMA, Ancestral Religion, the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. When we engage in ritual practice to incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate to align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, incorporating law, and then we restore balance when imbalance has occurred, then through ritual practice of NHOMA, we can restore balance and attain that maturity and keep our focus and overcome these personality conflicts. One person who may be more mature than the other person can deal with those personality conflicts because of that maturity, and then the other person, it may take them some time, maybe months, maybe even years to get to that level of maturity. The personality conflicts in and of themselves is not a basis for dissolution or moving in the direction of AWAREGU, divorce. However, if you find that you have differing core values, if the core values of the person is not rooted in divine order, if you have one person who's, rooted in divine order, the core values of these same principal values of manhood and womanhood and so forth, rooted in ancestral religious practice, rooted in the divine function we came into the world to execute. One person is focused on executing their divine function. The other person, that is not something that they value at all. They're not in alignment with that, even unconsciously. They're rooted in the perverse values of the whites and their offspring. And they're not even moving towards trying to realign themselves with the values that they were born into the world with, that are encoded within them. If there's a dissonance with regard to core values, then that is insurmountable. No amount of ritual practice will overcome that, because one individual is not trying to engage that process. They don't have the same core values. They've not embraced themselves. So then this is a situation where AWAREGU is recognized. When you look in the ancient Kemet, for example, first we'll look in ancient Kemet and then we'll talk about the Akhan tradition to give you some specifics. Divorce and remarriage were common in ancient Kemet at all periods, and you can find this kind of information all over the internet. And you'll find it was very common. They talk about the stress, the close nature of siblings. Both literary and documentary sources frequently specify that they share both mother and father. To resolve potential disputes before they might arise, the somewhat practical or pragmatic expediency was chosen of making it incumbent on the father to secure the permission of his older children, who stood to lose part of their inheritance. Since men, even full-grown men, remain economically dependent on their parents to a certain extent, and especially their fathers until the parents died, it would also be in the best interest of the son to agree with his father's remarriage and not risk rupture and complete disinheritance. Thus, everybody's wants or needs were satisfied by getting everyone to agree to what at least some people want. This pattern fits with the observation that agreement and resolution of conflict, rather than abstract justice, often seem to have been the aim of the Kamal court decision. Divorce and remarriage seem to have been relatively easy and relatively common. There's either party could divorce on any grounds, or basically without grounds, without any interest or record on the part of the state, meaning they weren't taking these records, meticulous records of divorce, so to speak. The vocabulary for divorce, like that for marriage, reflected that the marriage was basically when the man and woman connected with one another for the purpose of union and also for the purpose of cohabitation and having children and so forth. Although neither party had to provide legal grounds for divorce in the courts, so to speak, the economic responsibilities spelled out in the annuity contract made this a serious step. Thus, normally a married woman was supported by her husband for as long as they remained married, and his property was entailed for their children. Since even remarriage after the death of a first wife could lead to wrangling over property and inheritance rights, a bitter divorce and remarriage could lead to major legal contests. If a man divorced his wife, he had to return her dowry if she had brought one and pay her a fine. If she divorced him, there was no fine. A spouse divorced for fault, including adultery, forfeited his or her share of the couple's joint property. After divorce, both were free to remarry. And they have some more information here. The ancient Kemetic concept of adultery consisted of a married person having sex with someone other than the person's spouse. It was just as wrong for a man to commit adultery as for a woman. The system was family-centered, and the terminology for marriage and divorce was the same for both sexes. Adultery was defined in family terms and condemned for both men and women, and sex with somebody outside of the marriage. So the key here is talking about legality, talking about divorce. This was part of the culture. Of course, it is rooted in ancestral religious values, but we want to show, number one, that it was part of the culture. Number two, that a woman could divorce just like a man could divorce. And if it was the fault of the man, then she would receive that inheritance. If it was the fault of the woman, there were consequences as well. If the man divorced the woman, he had to return her dowry if she had brought one, and he had to pay her a fine. However, if she divorced him, there was no fine. So what we're dealing with here is the mechanics, legally, logistics of the divorce process, but it did exist in the culture. So now let's get into an Akhan example dealing with this, so we have a better understanding of the spiritual foundation of AWAREGYE marriage, but also of AWAREGU, and so we can understand the ramifications of this, ramifications of getting involved, and therefore making proper decisions, continuously respecting, reviewing every thought, intention, and action, and harmonizing each with divine order, and the ramifications not only legally, but also spiritually with regard to going through that process of AWAREGU, a divorce, something you really don't want to go through unless it's absolutely necessary. So, when we talk about our spiritual constitution, and if you look on the Nana Som page, for example, we talk about every individual, of course, has a kra. So just like your physical body has a brain, an organ that regulates the functions of the various organs in the body. You are a sumsum, a spirit. You have a spirit body. And in your spirit body, you have a spirit brain, a force dwelling in the head region of your spirit body. That is your ka, if you're male, ka-et, if you're female. That is called the kra in the Akhan tradition, and the krawa, if you're female. So the soul, the divine consciousness, it is an entity. Just like the brain is an entity, the spirit's brain, the kra, the soul, the divine consciousness is an entity. It's actually a divinity. It's a personal obosom. It's a deity that is assigned to you by the Supreme Being pre-incarnation. So as an ancestor or as an ancestress, before you get into a womb, before you reincarnate into a womb, you are drawn to Nyame wa Nyame. You are infused with a kra, or a krawa, a soul, a divine consciousness, meaning that a deity is directed by Nyame wa Nyame, or Amen, a specific force in nature. They direct that force to go dwell with this individual. And that force attaches itself to your head region. It is a force in nature that you can communicate with. It is a deity. It is an Orisha. It's a bosom. It is a Vodou. It is one of the Nsoru divinities dwelling in your head region, guiding you throughout the course of your life, that manifests as a strong pull within your head region towards certain thoughts, intentions, and actions, and a strong repulsion in the head region away from certain thoughts, intentions, and actions. It is a force in nature. Encoded within that force is the specific function you are to execute in creation. The male and female aspect of that function we call the Nkra and Nkrabia in the Akhan tradition. And also encoded within that force is the specific configuration of energy you have been given to execute your divine function. So you're given a force, you're given a specific function to execute in creation. Say you are supposed to be an immune system cell within the great divine body. That's your function. It's encoded within your spirit's brain. Then you have a specific configuration of energy so that you can execute that function. So you're given fiery energy. So you're not just given a function and just sent out there. The Supreme Being gives you a function to execute and gives you the capacity to execute that function, a specific configuration of energy. Just like every cell in your body, your immune system cells, they are given a function. That's why they're immune system cells. And they're given a specific energy complex so that they can execute that fiery function of killing cancerous cells and destroying bacteria and so forth. So they have a blueprint, but then they're also given an energy complex so they can execute that blueprint. Encoded within our spirit's brain, and in our book, the Okra complex, the soul of Akhan, we have the image on the front cover of the physical brain, the fourfold division, the cerebral cortex with its right and left hemispheres, and the cerebellum with its right and left hemispheres. The cerebral cortex is akin to the Nkra and Nkrabia, the right and left hemisphere, dealing with the function you have to execute. And then the She and Shebia is akin to the cerebellum, the right and left hemispheres of the cerebellum dealing with the energy you're given. Of course, the cerebellum deals with energy and equilibrium and motor movement and power and so forth, whereas the cerebral cortex deals with, those cognitive functions, knowledge and, analytical functions and so forth. In the same fashion, your spirit's brain has that same similar fourfold division. You have the divine function you have to execute, the Nkra and Nkrabia. You're also given specific configuration of energy so that you can execute that function, the She and Shebia. That's all contained within the Okra complex, the soul complex in your head region. So that's what you're given. When you're a spirit going before Nyame wa Nyame, that deity is assigned to your head region, and it is encoded with your function and the manner in which you must execute that function. So, and the energy you're given to execute that function, to support that function. Now that you're a spirit that has an Okra, a spirit that has a soul, now you're a whole being, a spirit with a soul. Now you can be sent into the womb so that you can be born into the world. However, you are assigned because of your ancestry, because you're sent through a specific ancestry, ushered into the womb by specific ancestresses and ancestors. Your ancestresses and ancestors were assigned thousands of years ago and still connected with you, assigned on the patrilineal side, the patriclan side, and our bosom that governs your patriclan ancestresses and ancestors. That's a divinity. On the matriclan side, you have an bosom, a force in nature, Orisha, Vodou, and so forth, that has governed your matriclan ancestresses and ancestors for thousands of years. So it's like a triangle. At the apex of the triangle is your soul, your divine consciousness, your head, your crop. That's at the apex of the triangle. At the bottom right and left corner, you have the patriclan ancestresses and ancestors and the patriclan deity. And then the left-hand corner, the matriclan deity which governs the matriclan ancestresses and ancestors. So you have that deity that governs your crop, which is your specific function you have to execute in creation. Then the bottom right and left corner of that triangle, which are at the base that supports the apex, is the patriclan deity and the matriclan deity. Tune into, just like when you look at the cerebellum, the two hemispheres of the cerebellum. That's akin to that patriclan divinity and matriclan divinity. Specific characteristics that you receive from your father, DNA-wise, specific characteristics you receive from your mother, DNA-wise. But those are animated by the deity that governs the patriclan and matriclan. So therefore, those deities are assigned to you pre-incarnation as well. So when you are sent into the womb, the deity that governs your head governs your function. And the deities that give nuance to that function are the patriclan and matriclan divinities. That manifests in the physical world. So when your spirit enters into the womb, the sperm cell carries the DNA of your father. The ovum cell carries the DNA of your mother, and they unite. And that is the zygote, and then your spirit takes up a residence in that union of the sperm and ovum cell. However, the spiritual force that animated the sperm cell, patriclan deity, that has been protecting your patriclan ancestresses and ancestors for thousands of years, that is the force that animates that sperm cell. It's a patriclan abosom, a patriclan divinity. Your ovum, the ovum from your mother has her DNA that will go into the characteristics that manifest within you. But the spiritual force that animates the ovum is the abusi abosom, the matriclan abosom, a divinity that has governed your matriclan ancestresses and ancestors for thousands of years. And therefore, it animates that ovum that makes up part of your being. So your cry, your soul, your divine consciousness is your function. But it is given further definition by the DNA of the father, DNA of the mother. And that DNA of the father and DNA of the mother not only gives you physiological characteristics and certain kinds of personality characteristics and so forth, but it also, the energy that governs the sperm cell, that governs the ovum cell is the patriclan divinity and matriclan divinity. That further gives nuance and character and texture to your spiritual makeup. Your central theme of your life is what's encoded within your head, your divine function. But then it's given more texture and nuance by the patriclan divinity, the matriclan divinity, and the blending of those two. Just like you are your own character, but you have some characteristics from your father, characteristics from your mother. Those blend, and that gives birth to your physical body. But your father is an entity, your mother is an entity, and you are a new entity. You have something from him, you have something from her, blended into your body, but you fuse that together and you become a new entity that never existed before. In the same fashion, spiritually, the spiritual force that comes from the father, the spiritual force that comes from the mother, those two blend and give further texture and nuance to you, the cry, your soul, your divine consciousness, the central theme and force in your life, in your head region. That all plays into our identity as males and females. So we come into the world in the Akhan tradition. We're born into the world. We understand that, yes, we have Y chromosomal DNA from the father, that mitochondrial DNA from the mother that makes up our physiological, bodies and so forth, and characteristics and influences our behavior. But that patriclan divinity, that deity who has governed the ancestresses and ancestors of the father's side for thousands of years, that divinity also governs us now. But then you also have the matriclan divinity that deals with identity and your connection to the matriclan, to the abusi Afuraitkaitnit, the great matriclan, has to do with inheritance and so forth. That governs us as well. Now, with a father, for example, you come into the world, you have a Y chromosome that defines you receive that from the father as a man. So, as you grow and develop, you deal with the ejabosome, the father's divinity. On certain days throughout the course of our ritual calendar, we go to the river that's governed by the father's divinity, and we engage in Afurakani, soul washing, and so forth, and we invoke that divinity of our patriclan, the ejabosome, called the Ntoro in the Akhan tradition. We do that on a regular basis. When we cleanse our cry, cleanse our head, we go to the river of our patriclan divinity and use the water from that river to cleanse our head on a regular basis. The same thing with females. They go to the river of their father, patriclan divinity, to cleanse their head. Now, we've been invoking that divinity ever since we were children. That divinity has been protecting us, that patriclan divinity protecting us ever since we were children. When a man grows up and he unites with a woman, and then they move into a household and so forth, and when they have children, of course, his Y chromosomal DNA goes into the child, her mitochondrial DNA goes into the child, and so the child is born. Of course, the woman does not have a Y chromosome. So she doesn't have that patriclan divinity going into the makeup of the child. But the father does have that Y chromosome, so it's the Ntoro of the father, the Ejabosome of the father, the patriclan divinity of the father that animates that sperm cell. That patriclan divinity protects the children because he can pass that on genetically, but also spiritually. It was protecting him ever since he was a little boy growing up, going through that divinity's river and washing his head and so forth. When he becomes a grown man and he marries a woman, that same patriclan divinity not only protects him, but also protects the children and therefore protects the entire household, including the woman, because she becomes part of that union. And when she has children, of course, that Y chromosome is in the children, so that divinity is naturally connected to the children by blood. This is why we talk about the deities are connected to us by blood. Even when we come to the Western Hemisphere, we're not disconnected because they are connected to us by blood. We are born connected with these forces of nature. This is why we're not dependent on anybody outside of our blood circle to connect with the Abosome. We're not dependent, for example, on somebody on the continent where we have to go and spend thousands of dollars to connect with the Abosome. We are born with them. They're connected to our blood circle, so we're not dependent on anybody outside of our direct blood ancestors and the deities who were assigned to us before we even got into the womb. So that patriclan divinity is protecting the father, of course, protecting the children, and of course the mother, because they're all part of the same household. And just as the father honors that divinity, and the children honor that divinity, and the mother honors that divinity as well, the father will also honor the mother's matriclan divinity because that energy is in the house as well. So he will honor that divinity who was brought into the home. She will honor the divinity, his patriclan divinity who was brought into the home. That goes on on a regular basis. As the children grow and develop, they do rituals, of course, to the patriclan divinity that governs them, as well as the matriclan divinity that governs them as well throughout the course of their lives. If a separation takes place, if a divorce takes place, it's not just a physical separation. When the woman separates, she is no longer under the protection of that patriclan divinity. She goes back to her, original household, and she's back under the protection of the patriclan divinity from her father. When she connects with the male and unites and marries and fuses with him through sexual activity, now she's under the protection of that divinity that governs him and the children that will govern him and the household. But when she separates, there's not only a physical separation, but there must also be a ritual separation. So there has to be a separation ritually with regards to the Ejabosome, the patriclan abosome that she was under the protection of while she was connected with that man. So we talk about that to say that this notion of, Africans don't engage in divorce, that's silly. Some people just reading some pseudo-Pan-African information, nationalist information, don't really understand the mechanics of what happens when the sperm and the ovum unite. The patriclan divinity and matriclan divinity's energy unites, fuses within the nature and person and spirit of the child, is connected to the household and so forth. And when a separation takes place, there's also a separation of, the energies that were governing the woman as well as the man. And so there has to be a ritual separation that takes place as well. So all of those things are key. Now, when we talk about, and give me 1 second, I want to scroll through this information, make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room as we're going through this information. All right. And for individuals, if you have any questions or comments on the phone line, hit the number 1. If you have any questions or comments in the chat room, you must log in first as a user in order to comment in the chat room. Okay. So we dealt with that part. We just wanted to deal with that to show the cosmological basis for that union of male and female based on the foundational relationship of Amen and Amenet, Inyame and Inyamewa, the two halves of the divine whole. And once we become fully actualized as OBARIMA man, fully actualized as Oba woman, then we are two halves of a whole that must unite so that we can bring ancestresses and ancestors in the world in a purified fashion so that they can continue their development and execute their divine function, and we must cultivate them rooted in the knowledge of that divine function. And the way we learn about their divine function is through our practices of Nanasom Ancestral Religion practice. And then we just also wanted to show that in the event that we find that one person is not, or one or more, if we're not committed fully to that AWAREGYE process, people are not rooted in those core values, have been divergent from that, then that's the only real foundation for a dissolution of the marriage. AWAREGYE is engaged in the annulment of that marriage, the divorce, but that also includes ritual processes for the separation of the male and female from these different energy complexes that they were fusing when they were together. All right. We talked about NHOMA or insight with regard to that. Now, we also bold this section, of course, but we need to reiterate this. Only the Afuraitkaitnit woman can balance out the Afurakani man. Only the Afurakani man can balance out the Afuraitkaitnit woman. An Afurakani male would pollute his body, his spirit, and our community, living and deceased, ancestral, if he were to embrace a non-Afuraitkaitnit female. An Afuraitkaitnit female would pollute her body, her spirit, and our community, living and deceased, ancestral, if she were to embrace a non-Afurakani male. Just as it is insane to ingest poison, anti-Afurakani, anti-Afuraitkaitnit to embrace the whites and their offspring on any level whatsoever. For this would be to embrace spirit of disorder. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit incarnate into the world as spirit of order. The whites and their offspring incarnate as spirits of disorder, all of them. Once again, disorder is not the balance of order. Disorder is the perversion of order, and we deal with that earlier in the book. The inclusion of poisonous substances and poisonous people, the whites and their offspring, is an act of self-destruction and one of the greatest manifestations of the insanity of self-hatred. Such inclusion not only brings perversity to the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit individual, him or herself, but to the ancestresses and ancestors who must return through them via birth. It is an attack on self and our ancestresses and ancestors to force them to be born into the world having a white, Asian, Indian, Arab, white, Hispanic, white, so-called Native American, or other quote-unquote parents. This creates conflict in an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit spirit whom has returned to live in the world once again through such a so-called interracial coupling. Because his or her spirit will be assaulted by the white quote-unquote parent and the white quote-unquote parent's relative, and the constant and perverse communications from the white quote-unquote parent's deceased relative. The goal of the whites and their offspring is always to misguide the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit child to embrace white people, the enemy, their cultures, and their false religions, thereby perpetuating white rule through the suppression of our natural desire for revolution, resolution. The conscious Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, quote-unquote, mixed child, however, using his or her NHOMA insight, grows to hate his or her white, quote-unquote, parent, the white, quote-unquote, parent's family and lineage, and rejects them completely. Because in reality, that's not his or her parent. We dealt with this in detail in Debra Sim, the ramifications of reincarnation. When an Afurakani male makes the foolish mistake of uniting with a non-Afuraitkaitnit female, one of the whites in their offspring, when a union takes place, when coupling takes place, conception takes place, the spirit that enters that womb is either one of his ancestresses and ancestors or one of the white beast's deceased relatives. If it is one of the ancestors or ancestresses of the Afurakani man, then that person who may have been an Akhan warrior 300 years ago, that spirit is now forced to be drawn and sucked into the womb of a white female and born 40 weeks later with a lighter skin and straighter hair and different features than he would have had if that Afurakani man had married an Afuraitkaitnit woman. He is the same Akhan spirit that lived as a jet black Afurakani man in a previous lifetime, in his last incarnation. But this time, because of what his descendant did, he has been forced to come through a white womb, and now he's lighter brown with a weaker constitution and so forth, looking like the average mulatto. But he is not really related to that white female beast. He is not related to her. He is not related to any of her deceased relatives or living relatives. He was an Akhan individual a few hundred years ago. He had been living like that for thousands of years. His descendant, one of his descendants, foolishly allied with one of these crackers, and now he's been forced to come through the white womb. But this is an enemy. This is a stranger. This is an alien to him. He was forced to come through the womb of this alien white beast. That is not his mother. Those are not his relatives. And when he awakens and uses his NHOMA, he will cut them off totally and never communicate with them again. And if she got sick and went into the hospital, he wouldn't visit. If she died, he wouldn't go to the funeral. That's not his mother. That's his enemy. Always has been and always will be. And the same thing if an Afuraitkaitnit woman got with a white male, white Hispanic, white Arab, and so forth. If she brought in one of her ancestors or ancestresses, that is actually one of her people. Being forced to look at this white male as a father, but that's not really that child's father. That's an alien, an enemy, a beast. Now, on the other hand, if the Afurakani male couples with this white beast and brings back one of her deceased relatives, now that child that is brought into the world will be a mulatto-looking child, but that's one of those white Irish people or white English or white Russians or whoever. This is an alien to this black man. This is not really your child. This is one of these criminal beasts that you participated in bringing back into the world. You helped to bring one of these spirits of disorder back into the world. So the key is when it's one of the Afurakani ancestors or ancestresses returning, just imagine if your parent had connected with one of the whites in their offspring. You were an Afurakani spirit in the spirit realm, hoping and trying to guide them to make the right decision. But if they connected with one of the whites in their offspring, they forced you into a womb, and now you come back into the world, you see yourself being drawn into this white womb, for example. You're the same spirit. You're not related to this white parasite. When your descendant was connecting with this white parasite, you were trying to keep him from connecting with her, because this is some alien he just met, some white beast he just met. You were trying to dissuade him from ever engaging in sexual activity with this individual. So this is an alien to you, and even if you come through the womb, it's still an alien to you. And just like they separated our children from our mothers and fathers and so forth during enslavement and ripped them away from them, never to be seen again, well, now, when our people engage in this kind of activity, making a foolish mistake, but then they awaken, those ancestresses and ancestors who show up like that, they become mulattoes, but they become mature and engaged in NHOMA, real insight, they will rip themselves away from that white pseudo-mother and cut them off forever and get back with their real family and reconnect with their real family. So we deal with that in detail in Bebrat's Son. We touch on it briefly here. Of course, the union of Afurakani man and woman, Afuraitkaitnit woman, is the definition of AWAREGYE. The notion that two males or two females can balance one another out is absolutely insane, physically and spiritually deviant and self-destructive. The practice of dissexuality, homosexuality in any form is an insane, perverse practice, which is the basis of the identity of the whites and their offspring. They are sexual deviants. This is how they came into being. This is why it is they who promote it. However, it is a foolish attempted assault on the divine living energy, the creator and creatress, Ra and Ra'et, who created all authentic entities in male and female balance. Such an insane affront to divine order is the highest manifestation of disorder for an Afurakani male or Afuraitkaitnit female to even consider and especially to engage in. This is why Nyame wa Nyame Amenet, Amen, the Abosom, and the Nananom Nsamampo, Supreme Being, the Orisha, the Vodou, the Egungun, the Kubito, and so forth, absolutely hate this sexuality, homosexuality, as well as the whites and their offspring, the purveyor of this sexuality, homosexuality. And of course, we did a broadcast talking about the eradication of this sexuality, homosexuality through ancestral religion. Because we must address that, because these perverts, these deviants, these spirits of disorder are promoting this sexuality, homosexuality, as they always have for thousands of years. Of course, this is nothing new. This is their nature to be spiritual and physical deviants and perverts. So, of course, they would seek to promote that perversity amongst our people and try to get our people to accept that perversity, because it destroys families, creates disruptions in the spiritual blood circle as well. And this is what they seek to do, create disruption, disalignment, fracturing within the family. Because that, when we're engaged in chaos like that, we become self-destructive, just like someone doing drugs. Once you do drugs, you disrupt your system, and then you set yourself up to be open to and succumb to all kinds of toxins that otherwise would bounce right off you. So this is a political move on the part of the whites and their offspring to disrupt our families and pervert our relationships, disrupt spiritual blood circles and so forth. Now, then we get into this notion of Afi, and then we're going to take a couple of phone calls. The planet Afi and the Abosom operating through that planet is the same spirit force operating through your reproductive system. The planet Afi is the closest planet to our Sase Earth and is nearly the same size. The gravitational pull of Afi affects the magnetic field of Earth in your body. The energetic effects of Afi affect the magnetic pull you have with regard to the Afuraitkaitnit woman. We're talking about that in this particular book, of course. On the flip side, the woman with the Afurakani man, sexual arousal, procreation, as well as the energy arousal responsible for artistic creation, innovation, and attunement. Now, the next section, of course, is specific to the OBARIMA Afurakani man, but on the flip side, you can see the same kind of information with regard to the woman. So, we say, of course, Afi, the Abosom goddess Afi, is Het Heru, Chetche, and so forth. So, the beauty of an Afuraitkaitnit Oba, or woman, stimulates within the Afurakani man the desire to harmonize with her and with divine order in all that he does. Notice we said harmonize with her. Excuse me, because beauty from the Afuraitkaitnit perspective, the true perspective is a manifestation of divine beauty, is evidence that divine order is being expressed in some fashion. So all beauty is an expression of divine order. It's a manifestation of harmony. In Afuraitkaitnit culture, law and love are the same word and the same concept. And we deal with that in detail in our book, MMARA, Divine Law, Love, and Divine Hate, the two poles of divine order. To be in love with someone or something is actually to be in law with someone or something. And we talk about the etymological origin of the V and the U and the W, and how the W is two U's and two V's side by side, and LV and LW, love and law, is really the same word, just like in ancient Kemet. The Coptic variations of the term law is meh, and the word love is meh. So meh, love, meh, law. Law and love is the same word and the same concept. So the word law, love is the same concept. To be in love, therefore, is really to be in law with someone or something. This means that one is in harmony with divine order with respect to that person or thing, with respect to our interaction with that individual entity, thing, event, and so forth. When you're in law with something, we don't use the term fell in love, fell out of love. Love and law is the same word. Law is the expansive pole of divine order. governed by the male and female force of divine law, love, which is Ma'ar and Ma'at. Male and female forces in creation that we communicate with, that we invoke, who communicate with us, possess and communicate and guide us. We don't fall into Ma'ar and Ma'at, into a deity and fall out of a deity. So we don't fall in and out of love. That's not what we're dealing with. We fall in and out of lust and so forth. But law, Ma'ar and Ma'at is everlasting, it's permanent. You can align yourself with Ma'ar and Ma'at, or you can become disaligned. So we're talking about to be in law with someone or something. This means that one is in harmony with divine order with respect to that person or thing. Our natural impulse is to properly align ourselves with divine order, and this is why beauty, called Fefel in our Akhan culture, is motivational. And once again, when we said beauty from the true perspective is evidence that divine order is being expressed in some fashion. When we talk about our natural impulse is to properly align ourselves with divine order, and beauty is an expression of order, that means we have a natural impulse to align ourselves with beauty, or to manifest beauty, meaning to express order. This is why we say Fefel, the term for beauty in our Akhan language, is motivational. It arouses not only the sexual aspect of our being, but all of the sensory aspects of our being. Once aroused, we are able to commit to, marry, join, or harmonize with Inyamewa, Inyame, and Sheshe, or divine order. AWAREGYE, marriage in the Afuraitkaini culture, is based, therefore, on a truly lawful, quote-unquote, loveful relationship, a relationship between the OBARIMA and OBA, men, women, committed through divine law, quote-unquote, love. So once again, law is the expression of order. It is the expansive pole of order. Beauty is an expression of order. It is a manifestation of harmony. When you see something that's beautiful in the true sense, it's simply manifesting harmony. It is an expression of order. We have a natural impulse. We are wired to align ourselves, our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. So when we see beauty emanating from the Afurakani female, or on the flip side, the Afurakani female sees that from the Afurakani male, that fail, or quote-unquote beauty, is motivational. Why is it motivational? Because it is an expression of divine order. It is an emanation of divine order. So it is a force, it's energy in creation, emanating from the abosom Afi, as well as the male abosom Fi, which is Heteru and Amen men and so forth. They govern that procreative activity, that arousal, not just sexual arousal, but the arousal of the mind as well, arousal of the imagination, arousal of artistic invention, creativity, and so forth. Not just procreativity, but creativity. Spiritual, intellectual, artistic, and so forth. This is why they talk about Afi or Heteru governing art and dance and music, all beautiful and harmonious forms. Creativity from the Adwini, the mind, and procreativity from the reproductive area. So that energy is motivational. It is magnetic. Afi, the planet Afi, is closest to Earth, but then it's nearly the same size. The magnetic field of that planet affects the magnetic field of the Earth. That same energy is utilized as a transmitter by Amen men and Afi, Heteru, and the divinity man. They utilize that planetary body as a physical transmitter of their spiritual energy. So that magnetism that we feel that's generated through these two divinities causes us to unite naturally with our other half. That stimulates not just sexual procreativity, but also mental and spiritual creativity, innovation, and so forth. So it is motivational. It moves us. Beauty is motivational. That energy of beauty motivates us to align with our other half so we can manifest that procreative activity to draw ancestresses and ancestors back into the world, but also to draw that wisdom from the ancestral community, as well as the direction from the abosom into our sphere of awareness so we can align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with order on a regular basis. So these are the cosmological foundations of marriage. Now, when we deal with aligning with our cry, all of this is encoded within our cry, our soul, our divine consciousness. This cosmological foundation we're talking about, these natural inclinations, that is encoded within the cry. So the more you deal with your own cry, your soul, your divine consciousness, when we talk about establishing a shrine for your cry, where you sit down at a shrine for the cry so you can align on a regular basis with the force that dwells in your head region, the deity that is sitting in the head region, guiding you towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order. When you align with your cry on a regular basis through susu, home, meditation, and other ritual practices, you begin that communication becomes more than just a pull in the head. That divinity itself will communicate, just like a divinity will communicate and show itself to you. You can hear that divinity and so forth. But even just on the basic fundamental pull in the head region, you'll be able to feel that pull towards things that are attractive and a repulsion for thoughts, intentions, and actions that are repulsive. So if you are considering connecting with an individual, your cry, when you're in alignment with your cry, that attraction or repulsion will be manifest. And you'll know this is in harmony with order. You also communicate with your nanano nsamako, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors on that periodic basis. So if you're unclear about the pull from the okra, you're not necessarily sure, but you have an idea, and you go to your honorable ancestresses and ancestors to get some clarity, and they give you some direction about what you need to do and why this pull is pulling you in this direction, or why certain things are not working out in the manner that you thought they should work out. They can give you insight based on their experience, having mastered life, having lived long lives and been through marriages and had successful marriages and so forth. If you have elders and eldresses in the community who've had, successful marriages, intergenerations, had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so forth, but have successful marriages that have lasted, standed that test of time. You can get that direct information from them. Some of us don't have, in different areas, in the different parts of the country, in certain communities, we may not have individuals who are involved in ancestral culture and religion who have successful marriages, that people are Christians or Muslims or atheists or whatever they are, and they're engaged in different kinds of marriage situations that are self-destructive, or people just staying together for one reason or another, but they really shouldn't be together and so forth. We may not have, a representation of that in our immediate surroundings. But you do have within your blood circle, you do have within your ancestral blood circle, you do have examples of the crystallization of that harmony between Afurakani man, Afuraitkaitnit woman, the reflection of the union of Inyamewa and Inyame, Aminet and Amen. You have that in your blood circle, and your Nanano Nsamampo, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, will guide you toward the kinds of decisions that are harmonious. And that includes when you have conflict, personality conflicts with your spouse and so forth, the best means by which you can overcome those in a mature fashion. So let's get some information. We see there's a couple of calls on the phone line, and then we want to look in the chat room as well. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, hit the number 1. Okay. All right, Michiawo on the phone line, number 5808. You got a question or a comment?
Michiawo, well, this is, Jennifer from Cleveland. And I am glad that I caught this particular broadcast because since you were talking about family and divorce, I wanted to ask you about two things. OBARIMA and a previous broadcast you did, what was it called, therapist or the rapist? And, my child is unfortunately affected by a divorce, and I've been trying to get him to understand the concept of manhood. I don't believe that his father efficiently and effectively prepared him for manhood. So I've been sharing, your publications on OBARIMA with him, and he's just completely resistant to the entire concept. So people in my family have been telling me that I should try to convince him to see a therapist or a counselor to help him deal with his issues and to grow up and step into manhood, as I've been trying to get him to do, but he just refuses. And the counselor that I talked to about him, the Western counselors believe, oh, well, that's just his personality and you shouldn't worry about it. But something inside me is telling me, no, I should be concerned about this. I want my son to step into manhood and embrace manhood and all that comes with it. I don't want, a child in a man's body. That's not what I believe I was put on this earth to do, as far as raising a child. And the Western therapists think that you should just let them do what they want. So I was thinking about your publication on OBARIMA and that particular broadcast on therapists and the rapists, and just thought I would call in to ask, your opinion on what people in this position, should do. And I should also mention, I had a dream and I've never had a dream like this before, that I was actually consulting with a priest on the situation with my son, and I was just laying out all of my complaints about, his behavior and what he's doing and what he's not doing. And I just wondered if, there comes a time when you do have to seek, consultation with a priest to, help our young men to step into manhood. And by the way, I'm glad that you've launched that campaign, and I definitely will make a contribution because it's something that's definitely needed right now. It's disheartening to see the number of young brothers that, for whatever reason, are not embracing and stepping into manhood. And it's probably because they just don't have any models or anybody to show them. So that's my long-winded way of asking the question about whether or not, things can get to a point, this particular issue can get to a point where, a priest would need to be consulted.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your sharing that information because I know it's going to, help other people in that situation as well. So, first thing, on a general point, once that AWAREGU has taken place, divorce has taken place, and there are different camps, and if there are, if there's not necessarily a great relationship between and the children, I kind of noticed that there's not a great relationship. What we tend to, of course, recommend, no matter what the other parent is doing, whenever the child is with us, and we're talking about for people who are, trying to get involved in culture and reestablish themselves, realign with their own ancestral culture and so forth, and maybe the other person may be engaged in some self-destructive stuff, and they may be lashing out and doing all kinds of stuff in their home. When the child gets with the parent, gets with the ones who are trying to realign and engage that kind of purified behavior, whenever they are with you, whatever time you have with them, you always model that kind of behavior, that kind of character that you want them to model. You don't necessarily focus on, with them, the negativity of the other parent, even though you could point it out and say they did this and they did that. But you always keep that to either a bare minimum or unless it's absolutely necessary. You know what I mean? But then with regard to the spiritual culture, you model that kind of culture. And then they begin to see, without you even telling them, there's a clear contrast between the way you govern yourself, the way you govern your emotions, the way you govern your mental output, the way you operate spiritually. They can see a difference between you, the way you are aligned, and then when they leave your environment and then go back to the other environment, they will see the discordance there, and they won't, be able to articulate it at first. They'll just notice there's discordance in this area. They can feel it, and then there's balance in your area. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing that begins to break down these kinds of barriers. Of course, people are programmed, and they're programmed by the other parent, programmed by peers and everything, and very often people are not engaged in ancestral culture, so it's like one person against the whole other community and so forth. However, you still have a couple of connections. You have a genetic connection. They're still drawn to you magnetically, and they're going to still be open to a certain extent, even if they, especially with young men, they don't always show it. They may even rebel against it and put up a front against it just to show that I'm not listening to that. But as young men, when they go home, when they're going to sleep, when they're, getting up in the morning and looking in the mirror and doing their hair, brushing their teeth or whatever, they are thinking about what you told them. Even when they're out in the street and doing whatever they're doing, it's still in the back of their mind what you told them, whether they try to show that to you or not. Maybe they'll show it to you when they become in their 20s and say later, hey, I really was listening. I was just being, resistant and so forth. He is listening to what you're saying. So it is in there. So the next piece is, depending on how resistant they are, if you were to first bring them, first you model that behavior. You make a clear distinction through behavior in your home and when he's with you and so forth. It's a totally different energy that's happening when he's with you and he's with away from you. And he'll begin to recognize that first it's unconscious, then it becomes conscious after a while. Then the second piece is if he's the type that's resistant externally, he's not trying to show you that he's really paying attention because he wants to pretend like he's not, wants to be rebellious and so forth, and being influenced by other people. If he's that type and you will bring him some information, bring him some literature, say, hey, you need to listen to this, or hey, you need to listen to that, then the first response is, if you're bringing me something, I'm not going to listen. I ain't got time for that. I don't want to be told this is what I need to be doing.
Right.
That in and of itself, no matter if it's good or not, just you being told this is what you need to do. No, I want to do what I want to do. If they're resistant to that, then you don't have to bring it to them on the literature side. You can bring those exact same lessons, these same 7 principal values you find in the book, you can bring them up in the course of everyday experience when they have a situation or have an event or some dilemma or whatever. When you see that principle fits that particular situation, then you can reinforce that principle at that point. Sometimes the only time they're receptive is when something happens. When something goes down, they need some assistance or need some direction, and you can answer with that principle. You won't be saying, hey, this is the 6th principle of the book and so on and so forth, but you're seeding them with that principle when they're open. Sometimes with injury, sometimes, somebody's physically injured or, emotionally injured or something like that, that's the only time they're open for, direction, open for, some, just like some people are very resistant. You're talking about natural health and things like that and the kinds of foods they could be eating or whatever. They're like, man, I ain't got time for that. I don't want to hear none of that. But then they develop a tumor. They used to clown you and ridicule you and everything else. They develop a tumor. They've gone to the doctors. They're like, nothing we can do. We're going to have to do radiation. Now, all of a sudden, there's a window of opportunity because they're like, well, what were you talking about? Now they want to know something. That's the window you can get in and feed them with that information, and it will get in them. That window may close after that, and they may say, I'm not going to do that, and they go through the chemo anyway. But then later on, something else happens, and then they remember what you seeded within them because it got in them when they were open. So every time you have an opening, sometimes trauma, whether it's anger or some situation, some emotional situation or whatever, that opens people up. And when he comes to you and says, well, I need to know this, even if it's in a resistant, belligerent kind of way, like, you probably don't know, but what do I need to know about this? Now, what he's really saying, you got to look beyond what his conditioning, what is he really saying? Because if he didn't really need something, he wouldn't come and ask for it. You can look beyond the condition part and what is his spirit really saying, what is his cry really leading him to say. And you look over his head directly to his cry, speak to his cry, and give him what he needs. He may pretend like, oh, I knew that anyway, I didn't really need that, but you know what I'm saying, he's still happy. So wait for those openings to take place, and you can see these 7 principles in, and they will germinate and take root. And then when the next crisis happens, then you'll remember what's going on. That's physically person-to-person, interaction to interaction. When he's away from you, then you also can engage in work as well. You deal with your nananom unsamafo, which are also his unsamafo. So they can put pressure on him day in and day out when he's asleep, when he's going throughout the course of the day. He starts feeling this intense pressure to engage in correct behavior, moral behavior, intense pressure. He's constantly being reminded of the things that you told him, runs into obstacles or injuries and things like that when he goes against it. He can't get away with things he used to get away with because you're constantly engaging in ritual practice to put that pressure on him when he's away from you. You give him the information physically when he's with you, but you put that spiritual pressure on him by connecting with the Unsamafo when he's away from you. And the combination of the two will box him in and, you know, you can get to him.
Okay. What about the other half of the question about, you know, seeking other help? You know, I've talked to other people who were supposedly, you know, in this tradition, and they gave me rituals to do, and, you know, that didn't work. And so when I had that dream, I was just wondering if, you know, that was an indication.
Okay, and the key is, just like you said, with regard to your pride, your soul, your divine consciousness, and your Unsamafo. When you had the dream and you were consulting, that means that you were engaged in some form of inquiry. And that's when you, if when you go to your own Unsamafo, your people, and they direct you to connect with somebody, then you know that who you're connecting with and the fact that you're seeking to connect with somebody is, you know, legitimate. If you were connecting with somebody just because somebody said, hey, you need a priest and you need to do this, that's not the means by which you know, connect with somebody. There's always been, you know, we've always had hoodoo men, hoodoo women in the culture, in the family who knew how to do certain things when they were needed. So we would go to them because that's their function. So if your Unsamafo direct you in that fashion, then at least you know then that it's coming from a pure place, that motivation to move in that direction, and then allow them to direct you to someone who's legitimate.
Okay, well, I'll just continue. I'll keep asking the question, you know, during my, you know, my meditations at my shrine. Because that dream was just so clear. And, I mean, I literally just laid out all of the, you know, the problems that I see with them, you know, one by one, you know, in that particular dream. So I'll continue to ask the question until I get an answer that, you know, it's clear and without any doubt, you know, that that's the route I should take.
Yes, definitely. And you'll get those confirmations as they come.
Okay. Well, may I say?
Okay. And I say that we appreciate that call. And we should say, if you were want to listen beyond 11 o'clock, we should have said, call-in number 657-383-0635. You only have about 15 seconds to call in. We missed that. 657-383-0635 to listen beyond 11. We're not going to go too much longer beyond 11. Have a couple more calls on the phone line. Okay. On the phone line, Michio, you had a question or a comment?
Yes. Kwesi, my question on last week's Tuesday show in regards to sovereignty in the nation. When most people, African males...
Hold on 1 second. There's something in the background. I can't really hear you. Something's going on in the background. Yeah, that's better.
In regards to sovereignty from last week's Tuesday's broadcast, my question, the first question, in regards to that is most of our people that decide they build their own towns, either here in this United States or across the board, when they have to be more inclined focus of establishing some form of military structure before going in the process of building, start small with any land or town, either establish or create one from scratch. That's my first question.
You said, would they be inclined towards establishing a military structure?
Like any form of military structure, because history has proven most of the people that establish anything that the Odwirafo comes and destroy it. So when
yes.
That's my question.
Definitely. So yeah, when we talked about those, in fact, the 7 principal values of ancestral nation building, the third principal value connected with the third day of the week, which is the Abosom, Benna, and Abena, the forces of, warfare and enforcing divine order. The third principal value is establishing a military structure to defend what we build, so definitely.
Oh, okay. And my other question, in regards to incorporate and corporation, is there a difference between the two? Incorporate and corporation?
Well, that's just incorporated. One version. It's the same term. Incorporate and corporation. That's the process. Incorporation is the process of establishing, incorporating a town. Talking about the legal framework and everything. So incorporating and corporation, that's the same thing.
Okay. All right. That's all the question I had to ask. Vastly for answering my question.
Okay. And we appreciate the call, Yenafida. All right. So I want to make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room before we end that. Okay. So we have some questions I see. Just give me a second as we're scrolling through here. I see one question, but it looks like we kind of went into some detail about that. How do you spiritually separate from someone you have been married to? And we talked about that. You may have asked that question prior to when we talked about the Akhan example, talking about the person separating from the protection of that Ejabosom, the Patriclan divinity, for example, the female going back to her family and separating from the protection of that Patriclan divinity of the male that she was once married to reconnect with her family. And there are different ways that it's done. It's always rooted in connecting with your Nsamafo and connecting with your Kra and the Abosom of your family. So it's always rooted in that. There are different cultural variations in that, but it always starts with your shrine for your Kra, your shrine for your Nsamafo, moving forward with that. All right, give me another second. Okay, what if someone used to practice dissexuality, homosexuality, and have turned away from it? What all do they need to do to truly heal completely and realign themselves? Okay, so check out that broadcast we did, Kokobo, eradicating dissexuality, homosexuality through ancestral religion. And we're talking about, of course, the vast majority of our people, 90+% of our people, 95% of our people who get involved in that perversity is typically because of trauma, domestic violence, sexual abuse, somebody, a child molester, rape, all these different things, whether they're children or even as adults. This trauma happening, and then people getting involved in that perverse behavior, no different than people getting, hooked on heroin, hooked on cocaine and things like that. Once that poison gets in the system, they start engaging in perverse behavior. Once somebody gets, assaulted like that, then they engage in perverse behaviors, not only because they've been conditioned mentally, but then the perverse, discarnate spirits of those, the criminal who engage in that perversity, rape the individual, molest the individual, as well as also can happen some of the lower level perverse discarnate relatives of the individual who normally would be repelled by the individual once they become wounded and open like that. It's no different than if you cut your arm, then the bacteria that normally just bounces off of you all day long, that bacteria can get into the open wound and cause a problem. So we typically would cover up that wound to make sure, it doesn't get infected. If a wound is opened up in the kahibit, the aura, so to speak, because of, assault and things like that, then these wayward, viral type, perverse, discarnate relatives and non-relatives begin to have more influence. Their projections, their thoughts, their negative energy, which you normally repel, or you may have felt as some kind of thought or inclination, like a negative thought, and you're like, well, why was I thinking that? And you just dismiss it and keep going. Now, those are normally the projections from those discarnate, weak, wayward type spirits. But your spirit is strong enough where you repel them, and at most, it's just some little thought that just flies in and flies out, and you dismiss it because their projections are so weak. But if you become weakened, then their weak projections seem kind of strong. And now you have a wound that's open, and now their, projections get in. And now their influences of trying to convince you, hey, you need to be with a man, hey, stay away from this child, stay away from this, if you're a child, stay away from this other child of the opposite sex, and they keep pushing you towards the child of the same sex. Then you start saying, well, ever since I was a child, I was drawn to children of the same sex, and you were literally drawn. This discarnate spirit is pushing you literally, and you can feel this pull towards, children of the same sex, and they constantly are influencing you away from children of the opposite sex. And you can feel this repulsion to children of the opposite sex and the pull towards the ones of the same. And since you experience that, you assume that, well, it happened, therefore it must mean I'm a homo, which is not true. Just like, yes, you may have presents under the tree because the family is brainwashed, and you ask the fake character Santa Claus for what you wanted, and then the next day the presents are there. And since you can physically verify that those presents exist, and they are exactly the ones that you asked for, then you make the leap and say, well, since they exist, and because they're the ones I asked for, that must mean that Santa Claus is the one who's responsible for putting those presents there. And of course, that's foolish logic. In the same fashion, yes, you physically can verify I have a pull towards the same sex. I've been having it since I was a child. I have a repulsion or being pushed away from people of the opposite sex. Been having it since I was a child up into adulthood. Ever since that child molestation event took place. And then you'll start saying, well, or even if child molestation didn't take place, but you were having these pulls and pushes. You can verify that those pulls and pushes, but then you make the false assumption based on this culture feeding this into you that the reason you have these pulls and pushes is because this is who you are. In reality, of course, it's not. It's no different than somebody physically standing in front of you and grabbing you and throwing you in front of somebody of the same sex. And if you try to walk away from them, they snatch you back up and push you right against them. And if you walk towards somebody of the same sex or the opposite sex, they punch you in the stomach or punch you in the face. And every time you move towards them, you get hit and you feel pain. But when you go towards somebody of the same sex, you keep getting pushed towards them. Well, you know what's happening then because you can see the person doing that. Because if the person is deceased and they're using lower level electromagnetic energy for these pulls and pushes, you experience the same kind of thing and you assume you must be pulled towards the same sex. So once we recognize what's really happening and we deal with our unsamanfo and we realign ourselves with our craft, then all those desires in such individuals are repelled, and that's done with. So you get back to normal. You get back to your normal self, which you never had those desires in the first place. That was never yours in the first place. Just like those addictions to crack. That's the poison in the system that's creating this artificial addiction. If you weren't poisoned like that, if those toxins weren't in the system and developing, these negative hybrid cells and so forth, that wouldn't even be part of your natural inclination because it's not naturally who you are. So once you get the poison out of the system and repair yourself, you don't have the desire for those drugs anymore. And prior to that, you had an overwhelming desire, so much so that you would go without food and you're sweating and going through withdrawals and shaking and everything else because you want this drug. So once you get that poison out your system, you no longer have those violent reactions. You have a repulsion for those drugs. And the same is true for people once they get those perverse spirits away from them and that perverse conditioning out of them, they have no desire whatsoever. So that's the basis of that. It's no different than overcoming drug addiction. And people have done that. All right. And it always goes back to dealing first and foremost in that situation with the Nananome Nsamapo, spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors, that they help you to realign with your own cry, and then it's done. All right, so a couple more questions, just want to make sure we didn't miss that. All right. And I think that was the only other question. Okay, somebody mentioned the pheromones with regard to hormonal secretions and so forth, and they get activated. This is one of the reasons for us to fine-tune our physical, our hormonal systems function properly so that we can rely on those pheromones that get activated. Yes, so that's true. Is there any truth to so-called negative energies in the womb that need cleansing? I think that was the last question. Yes, so not only can someone have toxins in the womb, bacteria in the womb, but yes, somebody can, of course, if you think about when people are engaged in sexual activity, what comes through the womb? What's coming through the womb? Having sexual activity with numerous partners and so forth, what discarnate spirit energy is left in that womb? Even the energy, the residual energy residue of the individual you were connected with. And people who are a little bit in tune, you recognize the reality that you engage in sexual activity with someone. Even if you stop that day, you don't see them anymore, you can still pick up on that energy 2 or 3 months later. You still have their energy, residual energy, hanging on you if you don't purify yourself. Some people, they'll go 90 days before they can get that energy off them. They haven't been with the person in 90 days, they've left them alone. But it takes that long to get that energy off them if they don't do something ritual. If you think about women having menstrual cycle, every time an egg passes through, either the egg is going to be fertilized, bringing an ancestral spirit into the world, or even if the egg is not fertilized, it's still a magnet for ancestresses and ancestors. All of your ova in your womb are magnet shrines for ancestresses and ancestors. So you're still bringing an ancestral spirit through. Now, what kind of Nsamampo are around you? If you're dealing with your Nananon Nsamampo, purifying yourself, you begin to repel negative discarnate relatives who are criminals and molesters and stuff like that. They can't even get near you because they're repelled by you because your energy is strong and vibrant. But no different than somebody walking down the street who's confident and has a strong aura and so forth. Some people know, okay, I'm not going to mess with them. But they'll go to somebody who looks depressed and weak and melancholy and sad and suicidal. They'll go and attack them because they're not giving off the kind of energy that's repulsive. Same thing spiritually. When you're dealing with your Nsamampo, you're strengthening your aura and so forth, your Kahibit, then you repel those weak, wayward spirits and so forth. They can't even get near you. But if you're not, for one reason or another, and that happens, throughout the course of life, some of the kind of ancestral spirits who are connected to those various thousands of ova are some of those weak and wayward spirits. And when you pass that egg through, then yes, that negative energy is connected to the womb in that regard. But the key always goes back to dealing with purification with the ancestral shrine as well as the shrine for your crop. That's the foundation of that purification, and that begins to knock out all these varied manifestations of discordant energy coming from discarnate entities. And the same thing with a male, when we're constantly creating sperm cells. And those sperm cells are little shrines for the ancestresses and ancestors that are drawn to us, that are with us, and we can bring some of them back into the world. They're connected to that sperm cell magnetically, so when that sperm cell connects with the ovum, we end up drawing one of these ancestors or ancestresses back. But depending on our level of purification, Jira, we're either going to be maintaining close relationships with the Nananom, Unsamanfo, and Unsamanfo Pa, or we're going to be maintaining relationships and people are hovering around in our orbit of these discarnate type relatives and sometimes non-relatives who are perverse and who can get closer to you because you're not repelling them. And the same thing, of course, is when males connect with females and they're engaged in promiscuity and they're having sex with a number of different women and the wombs that they go into and so forth, what other male's energy or other discarnate entities connected to that woman's womb that attach themselves to you. No different than bacteria. The same thing can happen with discarnate entities. Then you bring that energy back with you, back home with you. Then it affects you in a negative capacity. So all of these things must be taken into account when we're engaging in relationships and sexual activity and all of that. But when we embrace our ancestral religion, we don't engage in promiscuity and all of that foolishness because our crowd won't allow us to do so. We will be repelled from that kind of activity. We will only seek to align with people who are harmonious. We only seek to align with people who we know are engaged in ancestral religious practice, who are returning to their ancestral tradition, have the same core values and so forth. We're not seeking to be promiscuous and all that nonsense. So, all right. So that was the last question there. So we're going to end it here. It's 11:18. I'll say for tuning in. For the sister mentioned on the phone line about our campaign, the GoFundMe campaign for OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood Training Initiative, which of course is based on our book, OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood. We do the free workshop. Everybody who comes to the workshop receives a free copy of the book. For those who cannot attend workshops, young men as well as adults, of course, we made our book available as a free download. So if you don't have any money, you can still download the entire book. If you can't attend a workshop, if it's not one happening in your area, you don't have the funds, whatever. Of course, our workshops are free, but if you can travel to one, you can download the video series where we go through the book point by point and dissect the entire piece just like we would do in the workshop. So you still have the book, ebook versions for free, and the free, basically, workshop in the form of the videos, 3 different videos. Still have access to that information. We want to, of course, expand these workshops across the country, but also expand the dissemination of free copies of the softcover version of the book to as many of our people as possible, so that every Afurakani man, young as well as adult, has their manhood manual. They have something to focus on a daily basis, these 7 principal values of manhood. They can share that with other men. And then we also have individuals who are human services agents, work with the youth and work with adults as well, who have taken OBARIMA and incorporated this into their interventions, their therapeutic interventions with their clients, as well as after-school programs and at-risk youth programs and in-school programs and behavioral health programs and so forth. And, of course, we have our training, Sankofa Juma, to show social workers and therapists and case managers and so forth how to incorporate culture in the therapeutic interventions with their clients. We have our Akwamu Whole Life Journal. There's a manual for that. So, and the other piece with the Manhood Training Initiative is the employment piece, the entrepreneurial piece. Young men as well as adults can become distributors of our work so they can sell the books and generate income for themselves beginning immediately. The key is, though, many of them don't have the funds to purchase some books up front. For example, the first 10 books, they purchase wholesale, and of course they would sell retail. Now, books only range between $8 and $11, so the wholesale price, is 30% off of that. but some of our people don't have, maybe the first $70 or something like that to order the first 10 books. They would like to get them on a consignment. We're not in the position yet to do that, to print out hundreds of thousands of books and give them out and wait for the return, because we're just not in the position financially. So in that sense, we need support from the community, and your support will allow us to expand that entrepreneurship program to Afurakani men, young men and adults, everywhere where we are right now, where we are. We don't have to wait for institutions to be built, wait for people to travel back and forth to teach and so forth. We've been reaching them since 2008. When we first published the book, we made this book a free download, so thousands of brothers have downloaded the book and transformed their lives. We get feedback on a regular basis. They've transformed their own lives, stopped drinking and stopped smoking and all of that, transformed their relationship with their children, their spouses, or their women, the quote-unquote girlfriends and so forth, with their family members, began to be entrepreneurial, more focused, direct, engaged in positive behavior and so forth. So we've been reaching people. We just want to reach thousands more. We want to get softcover versions of the books to as many of our people as possible, and to start this entrepreneurship piece so that our people can become employed immediately. With your assistance, then we can get those books out to them. They can sell them, and then they can, recompensate us, and then we can print out more books and keep it going like that, so they can begin that entrepreneurial piece immediately. So you can go to the GoFundMe site on our webpage. We'll put that in the chat room. It's OBARIMA, GoFundMe.com/OBARIMA in capital letters, same as the title of the book. But you can just go to the Odwirafo.com page, our website, our regular website, and you'll see that information. If you'd like to support the work that we are doing, please do so. You can purchase the softcover versions of our 16 books. They range between $8 and $11. Any order of 10 books or more is automatically 30% off. So, for example, the first 10 books is $66 for 10 books. The entire 16-book set breaks down to about $7 per book because it's 30% off. So many people will order the 10-book set or 11-book set or the whole 16-book set. But whatever it is, whether it's one book or more, any purchase assists us in continuing to have the broadcast. We're working to establish a physical space for our institution as well. So any support we appreciate. Yedase, we thank you for that. And again, we will meet again. We'll be connecting tomorrow for Egua Marketplace. And Yedase, we thank you. We will meet again. What's up?